And this is Melissa. It is the 17th of May, 2026, and I hope that you're all doing well. I've picked a Redux to go up today. That's from March 16, 2014. Hidden Masters, Posing Answers, Age-Old Formula, Milked by Chancers. I've mentioned before that I return often to Alan's work because he's got the bird's eye view. He's got a perspective that sweeps across history and shows us that this agenda is all-encompassing. It's ancient. If you've listened to lots and lots of talks of his, then you understand that from just listening to him. If you've read the Waiting for the Miracle transcript, book form, you will have taken that in as well, or listened to those talks that he did with Jackie Petru. If you've read the Cutting Through volumes, you understand that he takes us back into ancient history. In this talk, he said, tonight I was wanting to talk about this age we're living in, the age which is well-directed. Every age is well-directed by those in power. I've gone into the history of the creation of systems, and everything is a system, a complete system worked out by not only those who rule over it, but all their helpers. From the ancient times, you had priesthoods, advisors. They were the advisors. They decided who the pharaohs would see and wouldn't see, in fact. They had a lot of power. Then the other religions took over from that down through time. Then we have a thing called democracy, where we've got not just kings and queens to keep supported in a lifestyle we can never imagine, but all their offspring and thousands of bureaucrats as well, who must live higher on the hog than you'll ever see. And that's the problem that we have today. But those in power and those who manage the power structure on behalf of the owners of the system, make sure you're given a complete system to believe in. All your reality, in fact, is manufactured for you. Even the memes that you'll see and the themes that you'll see are put out there, where you have different topics, often related to each other, across the world, are, in fact, just that. Memes and themes that get you gossiping, yapping, and thinking about things that they're telling you to think about. So this is Alan, and showing us always the all-encompassing system. Now, he reads from, or he mentions actually, a paper, an Army War College paper. Mentions a couple of them that he has over the years. The Mind Has No Firewall. And he also mentions something called Perpetual War. And that's just Alan talking from the top of his head and having two words that come into his head that sound like what he meant, but it's not. The actual paper that he is referring to is called Constant Conflict. So perpetual and constant are kind of similar there, and war and conflict as well. So the paper is Constant Conflict by Ralph Peters from the Army War College paper called Parameters, summer of 1997. We have entered an age of constant conflict. Information is at once our core commodity and the most destabilizing factor of our time. Until now, history has been a quest to acquire information. Today, the challenge lies in managing information. Those of us who can sort, digest, synthesize, and apply relevant knowledge soar, professionally, financially, politically, militarily, and socially. We, the winners, are a minority. For the world masses, and let me just say here, that's you and me. For the world masses, devastated by information they cannot manage or effectively interpret, life is nasty, brutish, and short-circuited. The general pace of change is overwhelming, and information is both the motor and signifier of change. I will post this constant conflict for you to see. It is also, I'm pretty sure, on the website. I'll double check that. In order to get us to this place that we're going into, which is a social credit system, where eventually we'll end up with something like a universal basic income, where we will be tracked and monitored, and our credits will be withheld if we're not good. This will be done in the name of saving the planet, or some combination of things. It's interesting to watch the hantavirus drama, because they use the same playbook. It starts on a cruise ship, and they're locked down for 42 days or whatever it is. It's about the time that the earth flooded in the days of Noah, I think, but it's a long time. Maybe hantavirus won't catch on into the minds of the public, and it won't be the thing, but there will be a continuing series of crises, and I think it's clear that that's the way it's going to be. There's a sense sometimes I get that people are relaxed since COVID. You just go about your business, and we don't want to think about that. We don't want to remember that. But from my perspective, we have been in just a series of different types of crises and information overload, and really, in a way, information fatigue. And this is technique. One of the things that I was thinking about this last couple of days is cults, a cult. How do cults work? And I was sent by a friend a series called Wild Wild Country. And this is about the Bhagwan Rajneesh compound, little city that they built in Oregon in the 1980s. And I remembered that, but I hadn't thought about it in many years. Well, this documentary came out in 2018, but my friend Graham also sent me a movie that was made inside the Indian compound of Bhagwan Rajneesh in the 70s. And you can very clearly see in the techniques that are being used that it was a blend of New Age thinking and lots of things that we think can go along with that, as well as sex, lots of sex, all mixed together. And it so clearly looks like a cult. So I've been looking at that. I'm not going to post a lot about that right now because I'm still looking and reviewing, but having said it, you can look it up yourself. I found something this afternoon, though, looking at it, called Children of the Cult. This is from The Guardian from 2024. Courageously covering what Netflix's Wild Wild Country didn't. This film confronts those who ran the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh meditation centers with the shocking testimonies of its child victims. So there is a film that was done based on a book, I think, and it focuses on the sexual abuse and rape of children in the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh meditation communes in Britain, the US, and elsewhere in the 70s and 80s. I saw a news interview with a woman who wrote a book, I think it was called In the Shadow of Enlightenment. And she talked about basically being, just farmed out sexually as a child. She said she was 13. And she has notes that were written to her by men that were at the commune saying what a beautiful body she had and how much they enjoyed being with her. They would call her beloved. I guess that's how they talked to each other. And I just got to thinking about cult. Now, if you look up a definition of cult, then, people are sticklers for words and they want to stay within that framework. And they say that cult comes from the Latin cultus, to worship. And they are groups that have extreme religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs and rituals. Usually there's devotion to a person, and maybe that person is pretty authoritarian, or so the cult can have an element of abuse from an authoritarian leader. Actively practice a kind of brainwashing. And then I remembered, as I was looking into this, that Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, who was held in the UK basically under a, house arrest at an embassy, described his childhood as being on the run because of a cult that his mother had gotten involved in. And this was called The Family. And he talked about, I'm not sure if I don't think his mother ever married the man who impregnated her with Julian's brother or half-brother. But he was abusive, he was involved in a cult, and they were kind of on the run. So this man, the cult was Australian, it was called The Family. And it was founded by a woman named Anne Hamilton Byrne in the mid-1960s. And they meditated, they had meetings and sessions, they used LSD. And the basic notion of this was that Anne was a reincarnation of Jesus Christ. But there were also elements of Eastern philosophy in there. And her followers, I'm reading this, I'm not just talking here, but her followers beheld a karmic deity obsessed with cleansing their souls. Anne prophesied the end of the world, arguing quite comically, though not to her, that only people in the Dandenong ranges of mountains east of Melbourne would survive. So Julian Assange describes his childhood as being on the run from this man for extended periods of time. Now, The Family, the cult that he was involved in Australia, is not to be confused with the Family International. This was a new religious movement founded by David Brent Berg, an American preacher who started something that is called the Family International, or Children of God. And they've had lots of different names there, but a British court found them to be an authoritarian cult that engaged in systematic physical and sexual abuse of children, resulting in lasting trauma among survivors. They had some very far-out teachings. They were soldiers in a spiritual war, and they were being helped by celebrity angels. And those included, if you can believe it or not, a celebrity angel was Richard Nixon, Winston Churchill, Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, Merlin, Audrey Hepburn, and the goddess Aphrodite. There were a couple of things that kind of got me down this path of thinking. Why are there no arrests or prosecutions on the Epstein files? There's so little. You've had a flurry of activity and then nothing. And even the people lost their job. I think a high-level Norwegian minister who lost his job, and a few people have been fired or stepped down, et cetera, but even amongst the high-profile people, like the man formerly known as Prince Andrew and Peter Mandelson, we're not seeing arrests. And I will put up an article here from National Public Radio, which of course is, national propaganda. But the article is entitled, "After the Release of the Epstein Files, Why Have There Been So Few Arrests?" And I had stumbled onto something a few days ago when I was thinking about Epstein. And I'm like, where's those arrests? And this article from 2018 popped up in its place, which had nothing whatsoever to do with Epstein. And yet, in a way, it does. #MeToo brought down 201 powerful men. Nearly half of their replacements are women. And one of the things that's so interesting about this is it actually shows you in great detail all 201 people who lost their jobs or stepped down, etc., and who they were replaced by. And I can't tell you across the board if all of these men were, guilty, innocent, but I to my own satisfaction, there were some men who were caught in the crosshairs of #MeToo that I very much doubt deserved to be pulled down. This was a divisive man against woman, completely politically motivated thing. And so what merit was there was covered over by just how abusive it washed out to be, where men were basically tried in the public without jury, fired, censored, shadow banned, whatever, many times without any kind of proper investigation. It was public pillaring of people's reputations, so that I think many men got caught from the few who may have, deserved it. Whereas with the Epstein files, agencies such as the Department of Justice, et cetera, say, well, there's just not enough to prosecute. The name's on the list, but there's not enough to prosecute. And I mentioned that in the CTTM book club today, and somebody said, well, that's easy. It's because the #MeToo can pit us against each other, and therefore it got all kinds of press and publicity and promotion, whereas the Epstein list is really the elite against all of us, and therefore there's simply no reason to promote it or talk about it. Let's just forget about it. But in the big scheme of what I wanted to say tonight, it just comes back to an abusive system, an abusive cult-like system. And again, don't want to play too fast and loose with the word cult, but we have so much filth around us that we've accepted, and I'm not blaming the victim here, because as Alan points out very clearly, over many, many years we are born into an abusive system. Just a couple more examples of the abusive system that we're born into. But I also want to point out our complicity, because I think that maybe there's not a personal, maybe there's not a global solution, but there are personal solutions. And those are the ones that you decide for yourself. But to really see just how ugly the system is a good starting place. I want to mention male circumcision. This is from theindependent.co.uk. This is from 2019. Male circumcision needs to be seen as barbaric and unnecessary, just like female genital mutilation. Circumcision of male infants as a human rights violation. Now, I bring this up because I'm looking at it as a kind of trauma that is done to men. So that's what I want to talk about. How are we traumatized by this system that we're born into? Norway, as it turns out, is the only country that keeps statistics on the circumcision status of rapists. And that data shows that 80% of rapes are committed by circumcised men. Now, I asked the question, well, how many Norwegian men are circumcised? 3% of the population are circumcised. So that really is quite an interesting statistic there. And I'm told that I've got source bias there because the data is presented by Intact America, an anti-circumcision advocacy group, and it supports their position that circumcision is linked to violence. But whether or not that could be confirmed by adequate data, I think if it's clear to me that it would cause trauma in a baby. And so there are so many ways in which boys and girls are traumatized. And look at the grooming gangs scandal in the UK. And nobody talked about it for fear that it had ethnic and religious background there, with many of the perpetrators being Pakistani British, and so you just simply couldn't talk about it. You couldn't talk about it. This is a story from last year in The Guardian. The event actually happened years ago, but it was written about last year. In late 2012, Samantha Walker Roberts took a megabus from Manchester to London, bound for the Houses of Parliament. In an airless room in Westminster, she told Keith Vaz, then chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, her story. In October 2006, aged 12, she had gone to a police station in Oldham, Greater Manchester, to report that she had been sexually assaulted in a graveyard. Staff at the station were dismissive, she told Vaz, and encouraged her to accept a lift home from two men loitering near the doorway. She ended the night in a detached house in a quiet cul-de-sac where multiple men took turns to rape and abuse her. This was called localized grooming. So sometimes I do a little bit of speed watching of a television show. I've told you before that someone sent Alan the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones on disc. And we watched an episode, and then Alan took all of the discs and put them in the fire and burned them. We did not get through the first episode, but we reached the point, and he's like, okay, that's for the bin. That's for burning. And so this is kind of the way that I speed watch a series. I just imagine that I'm sitting next to Alan, and we're going to watch it. We're going to watch several episodes of it. We'll watch all of it, or it goes into the fire. So one that I'd heard talked about, and I knew I wouldn't get far, is Euphoria, a teen drama, okay? A teen drama, a drama for and about teenagers. I did not get far. I did not get far. But I got far enough to hear one of the characters say to another, everybody in the world watches pornography, whether they deny it or not. So I thought, okay, that's enough. That's enough. Okay, I get that. So just today, I did a quick little thing. I said, what are the top 5 TV shows by ratings in 2026? And this is what I came up with. Dexter Resurrection. Need I say anything more? Because Dexter is about a serial killer. And this is the latest iteration of that, I guess. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm not exactly sure what that is. It may be a spinoff of Game of Thrones. I do know, after doing a quick search, that it is full of nudity. I am told, these sites that say, oh, let us tell you which episode has nudity, where to find it, etc., etc. The Pit, I think, is about a hospital. They're probably carving up bodies. Who knows? I don't know. Heated Rivalry and The Boys are number 4 and 5 on the list. And Heated Rivalry, I think it's a Canadian show. It might be hockey. I'm not really sure. But I read a little bit about it, just briefly, just enough to understand that they're pushing bisexual men, gay sex. The Boys, the same thing. I think The Boys is a political thing, and they're pushing bisexual and gay men. And there's lots of sex in both of those. So I can imagine what that is. Here's the Parent's Guide to the Boys. Sex and nudity, severe. Violence and gore, severe. Profanity, severe. Alcohol, drugs, and smoking, severe. Frightening and intense scenes, severe. Continuous sexual fetishes depicts a male's lustful, explicit... Oh, I can't even carry on reading that. Okay. So this is the the other military paper there that Alan mentioned is The Mind Has No Firewall. So the mind has no firewall, and constant conflict. And constant conflict, again, is information is at once our core commodity and the most destabilizing factor of our time. Information is everything. It's the news, it's the meme, it's the entertainment, it's the novel, it's the movie, it's the thing it's the podcast, it's the so-called alternative. I watched some of the so-called alternative, and I happened to catch a couple of women getting titillated over the sex scandals of the Dalai Lama. And, this is for truthers. Plenty of bodily fluid talk there. I could go on and on. One thing that Alan and I read several books on, and we did a pretty deep research into the Oneida community of the 19th century. An intentional community. And aren't we getting a lot more intentional communities now? And that had some interesting ideas about sex. And one of them was that well, first of all, I will say that Oneida were eugenicists and racist, and they wanted free love, maybe not in the way we think of it from the 60s, but they wanted no unwanted pregnancies from this. And so what did they do? They paired very young boys from puberty on with much older women, and that would stop unwanted pregnancies. This is one, if I can find it, that came across my inbox the other day from the New York Times. Older women are in demand by younger men. What a shift in the dating preferences of younger men reveals about our changing norms. And here was a talking head young woman from the Times, and someone else, who was she, where was she from? I'm not sure. But anyway, the third woman was a psychologist, and they were all discussing why it might be that on dating apps, here it is, my 52-year-old friend and colleague separated from her husband, and I made her a dating profile, and the response from men in their 30s was overwhelming. More young men are seeking to date older women. And it goes on to tell you why women over 40 have more spending power and social capital than ever. Why the age gap? Okay. And it goes on to tell you the movies and the television shows and the reality shows that are promoting this. But I watched a little bit of this. It was a podcast, and I'll link to it. What most interested me was the way the young women talked about it, in a way that was matter of fact, kind of casual about sex, but also, I'm sorry, but just ridiculous. Okay, so here's one of the young women, very young, I don't know how old she was, but half my age. I don't think that we were previously allowed to be outwardly horny. What? I mean, does she not know about the Girls Gone Wild videotapes? I mean, those were VHS. This is ancient, spring break behavior of girls. Okay, but she says, I don't think that we were previously allowed to be outwardly horny. We were not allowed to talk about our desires and the strangeness and singularity of them. So it does feel transgressive to be able to look at a dating app profile and really objectify a very strong young man who's maybe been tanning in Costa Rica for a bit. I don't know, I'm just spitballing. So while that does feel fun, obviously we understand how really filthy and disgusting being objectified over and over again can feel. So again, it's imperfect, but I understand why that can feel like a nice power grab to sit there and be like, you know what, I wasn't afforded this privilege in the past. I'm going to sit here and objectify the hell out of these 24-year-olds. I mean, yeah, okay. So I know that we've been told, and on the face of it, have women been objectified? Yes. But I mean, the word slut shaming, I was introducing someone to the term slut shaming recently. They hadn't heard of it. And that's, don't shame somebody for their promiscuous behavior. Don't do that. That's bad. And I guess the word came to prominence during the slut walk movement. When did the slut walk movement start? 2011. It began in Toronto, Ontario. After a Toronto police officer suggested that women should avoid dressing like sluts in order not to be victimized. Now, I'm not sure. I think studies don't play that one out, that how you dress has anything to do with whether you're going to be victimized. But the idea that women are just now being allowed to express themselves sexually, I mean, the whole 60s peace, love, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of that was the beginning of an incredibly highly sexualized period. So, not to get too far afield here, what I'm saying is that Alan once said, or there's more than one way to be sexually abused. Look at what we're programmed with on television, in the media, in the news. That is sexual abuse. To even talk about sex as a sacred act gets you laughed off the platform. But that is the culture we have been given. So you grow a culture in a laboratory. And that's why looking at these movements, looking at these things that happen through time and understanding, there's probably intelligence agencies behind all of these communes and ashrams and cults, no doubt. But even going back to Oneida, the political connections of these people, the relationships of the, I think his name was John Noyce, who started Oneida, completely, totally connected politically, and they always are. And Alan talked to me about the idea that many of these religious groups, I guess Netflix has cornered the market on doing series about religious cults and sexual abuse, because I noticed that there's another one, I don't remember the name of it, but that is about a couple that infiltrated not mainstream Mormonism, but that always did have a component of polygamy in it, but some other offshoot where the guy was the autocratic cult leader. So these things aren't new. They're often affiliated with religions. And I want to mention to you that in the Cutting Through volume, the first one, which is the Androgynous Hermaphroditic Agenda from 1999, so much of the first volume is about how cultures are created, and the religions that are established for social control. He writes here, established religions have always been the basis of political control from its initial function of social control. All religions have a basis in Indo-Persian Zoroastrianism. The Magi used mind control, which, apart from technical innovations, the CIA, Seeing Eye of America, and Tavistock Institute are still using. In rendering an individual helpless, unable to decide and follow a course of action, he must be given completely conflicting information on the same subjects. What is interesting, though, here is all that Alan writes about how the priests themselves, and this can be in any order or brotherhood, it can be the military too, but it's about how sexual abuse is used on the initiates, particularly homosexual abuse, how that takes them from a very young age and molds their mind in the direction that their superiors in the order want their minds to be molded. And so, yes, in looking at a cult, I still have to, take that bird's eye view out and say that we just live in an abusive system, all the way abusive. And I've just pointed out a few things, from genital mutilation to grooming of young girls to offshoot cults that are allowed. They're allowed in the name of what? Religious freedom or what? They're allowed to prey on people. And they still exist everywhere. And, sex is about much more than blackmail. It's about inflicting, when it's out of its proper place, it's about inflicting maximum emotional and physical damage on you. And this has been used. This is why we, have this filth on the internet, on the television. So in my kaleidoscopic, dancing through to see what, everyone is talking about, where are people's heads at? And, I hear the truth sayer, the truther say, we've got to get America back, and we're a republic, and don't let anybody tell you different, and where did the country go wrong, and let's get it back. And I don't have time for that. I don't think any of us have time for that. We need to get up to speed. If there are places in which we as individuals can make a difference, it isn't in getting our countries back. It's about really basic things. And one of the first things is disconnecting from filth. We participate in this. So disconnecting from that filth and seeing it when look at the way that President Trump talked from the day he opened up his mouth. And some of you voted for him in 2016 and again, whenever. His words that I won't even say, grabbing women in places that I won't even repeat for you, and you voted for that. Filth. And we're surprised. We're surprised. We're mocked. So where I think I'll talk a little bit more in the future about UFO disclosure and religions and cults, and I also need to come back to talk again about, the New Age is such an old-fashioned term. So I want to talk about some of the things that come out of the New Age and show, and Alan has done this repeatedly, but to reiterate how those directly connect to technocracy, things of control, technocracy, sustainability, sustainable development goals, come out of the decimation of cultures that supported us for quite a long time, and we've all lived through, and our parents before us, and some of us, our grandparents, lived through, just an explosion, a complete takedown of our culture. And this is from someone that I understand, I've not read them before, but I understand that Rod Dreher is a conservative Orthodox Christian. I don't know what branch of Orthodox, but this is entitled, Are Pastors Being Prepared for Disclosure? And I'm not going to read it. What I'm going to point out is something that I find very interesting. It's the dialectic. And he's quoting some different lower tier, third tier, he calls them third tier Protestant pastors and evangelicals who said that they met with some people from the government who said that the churches need to get prepared for the release of these secret files on extraterrestrials, and it's going to really knock their congregations for a loop, and so they need to get prepared. And so Rod Dreher asked the question, well, if this is true, why didn't they approach some higher tiered and some Catholics and some Orthodox? Why was it just the evangelicals they approached? And he quotes Nick Redfern, who is a writer on UFO and so forth. And the idea is that that what's happening is not a disclosure of UFOs and aliens, but what it is are entities. And he even cites a long deceased Russian Orthodox Father Seraphim Rose. And he warned back in the 1970s, evidently, that the entire UFO story was a demonic deception that would prepare the way for the Antichrist. Father Seraphim taught that these entities presenting themselves as aliens are nothing more than ancient demons manifesting in such a way as to be maximally credible to people living in a scientific, technological age. And then Dreyer writes here, interestingly, the non-Christian UFO investigator Jacques Vallée, the gray eminence of this world, reaches a very similar conclusion in his seminal book, Passport to Magonia. So Seraphim writes, Orthodox literature has many examples of demonic manifestations which fit precisely the UFO pattern. Apparitions of solid beings and objects, whether demons themselves or their illusionary creations, which suddenly materialize and dematerialize, always with the aim of awing, and confusing people, and ultimately leading them to perdition. Now, I understand that Father Seraphim is highly regarded. He's actually on his way to something called veneration or sainthood, I guess. Oh, they're about to canonize him. Yes, and I don't know his work, but I am going to point out to you that before Father Seraphim became a monk priest, he lived as a gay man in San Francisco in the 50s. He also studied under Alan Watts at the American Academy of Asian Studies, and he got into Chinese philosophy and Buddhism, etc., etc. He then had a conversion experience and became a Russian Orthodox priest. The trajectory of Father Seraphim is so like what Alan describes in the Fisher King process of pulling the brighter fish out and raising them up to significant functions, whether it's in the priesthoods or the military or bureaucracy. What I am saying is that you've got to know your own mind, guard your own mind, think for yourself, take some holidays from the incessant whatever that we're being given. You know, what's interesting to me in something like Dreyer's piece here is it's pure Hegelian dialectic. It's either an alien or it's a demonic entity. There's no third option there that this is a military psyop from the get-go, that anything that people may think that they see is completely achievable through modern technology. That is never given to us as an option to consider. So we have to think for ourselves right now. It's crucial. And I just thank you for your support. I thank you for listening to me. I always want to be a shorter talker, and I appreciate you. I know some of you do get something from it, and that humbles me, quite frankly. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting what I'm doing. I still have these beautiful second edition volumes, and I'm so happy. I want to share maybe one last thing. Here is an email that I received from someone who got the books and wrote, Melissa, I had to write. I received Cutting Through today at work, opened it behind my desk, and the feeling of the love and care that went into it was visceral for me. It took me by surprise how tangible it was. I actually started crying, and I'm not a person prone to that. We talked in one of the book club meets for Waiting for the Miracle about the connection that one can have to others. When you think of someone and the phone goes, and it truly felt as if I had connected into the emotion from all concerned in making it happen. Even now, in fact, every time I thought about it after I reconnected to that energy, for want of another term, for me it's like an all-over body fizz, a physical rush sort of thing. I really don't know how to describe it. I used to equate the feeling to whatever the Holy Spirit is meant to represent, but now I feel it's like a connection of what real love is, or a connection to Source, the thing that connects us all. Whatever it is, it feels like a truth of who we actually are or can be and become. It's so difficult to describe. I wish I had the words to convey it. Perhaps if I put enough intention into this as I write, you will feel it too. I feel so blessed to have found our we community, and here I am starting to cry again. Gosh, what an incredible world we live in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And, you know, that intention, that energy, it came through because I started to cry when I read that. And even reading it again, my eyes watered up, because there is something real that we can connect to. I can't tell you what it is. I'm going to get shot down when I try. And what I feel and connect to isn't for you anyway, it's for me. But that is real. And there is actually protection in that, for you to have your experiences and for you to see the world subjectively from your own eyes. There's protection there. If the mind has no firewall, then you can be protected by going first to your mind and then carefully guarding it. And so I wish you all to have a good week, and I thank you again.
Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix, a blurb that is, and it's March 16th, 2014. I've been awfully busy. I'd like to put more blurbs out. In the meantime, I've got more interviews coming up in other shows. I do have the opportunity to go back on regular shows, but I don't want to get caught up in that too quickly, because it takes it's a full-time job, basically, trying to go over all the world's problems. And the problems will keep coming because they're manufactured for us to follow. In fact, that's how you direct the future, by those who already own it, basically, and own the past. So I've been awfully busy, and even last night into today, I've been working on the water pump here, because that packed in about 3 o'clock in the morning. The problem is outside, you can't get into the well because it's under about 6 feet of snow. So I'm stumbling along here as you have to do sometimes when nothing else is working properly. But tonight I was wanting to talk about this age we're living in, the age which is well directed. Every age is well directed by those in power. I've gone into the history of the creation of systems, and everything is a system, a complete system, worked out by not only those who rule over it, but all their helpers. From the ancient times, you had priesthoods, advisors. They were the advisors. They decided who pharaohs would see and wouldn't see. In fact, they had a lot of power. And then the other religions took over from that down through time. And then we have a thing called democracy, where we've got not just kings and queens to keep supported in a lifestyle we can never imagine, but all their offspring, and thousands of bureaucrats as well, who must live higher on the hog than you'll ever see. That's the problem we have today. But those in power, and those who manage the power structure on behalf of the owners of the system, make sure you're given a complete system to believe in, and all your reality, in fact, is manufactured for you. Even the memes that you'll see and the themes that you'll see, that are put out there where you have different topics often related to each other across the world are in fact just that. They're related to each other to get you gossiping, yapping, thinking about things that they're telling you to think about. And they can be minor things, fairly minor, or the ooh and ahs stories that we always get. And but you also get an awful lot of preparation for the future. Austerity, Agenda 21, also called the Millennium Project, and many other names, sustainability, etc., etc. We're all been trained into this new system on behalf of those who manage it way above us, of course. Most of me will never even know their names, of all the thousands and thousands of guys working in think tanks, men and women, and working as advisors for presidents, prime ministers, and on behalf of the masters who own the system, basically. And those who run the money always own the system. They always do. Money is power in this system. They made sure of that, you see. That's why they have the money. That's why a small clique always keeps control of the distribution and creation of money across the planet. This elastic thing called money that's backed by nothing, generally, except massive debt. But that's okay, because you'll always pay off the debt in real goods and sweat and all the rest of it. Remember, there's many forms of slavery. Many, many forms of slavery. And I've mentioned so many times with Charles Galton Darwin talking on behalf of the elite in the 1950s, when he said we are in the process of creating a more efficient form of slavery. It's one, in other words, which you'll never figure out. You'll never figure out. You'll get the ones down below to attack. You'll have politicians to attack, throw tomatoes at, go boo. And prime ministers, presidents, they come and go. And then the next one's just as bad as the last one, and the same agendas go on, you see. So you're given these Punch and Judy shows to distract you and to give you hope that once you get this guy out, the next one might be better. It never is, of course, because there's only one agenda. But remember, you can be taxed to death. Tax means to labor. And the original idea of democracy had it written, well, talked about, put that way, because the British Constitution is one of these verbal ones where it's very, very flexible for lawyers to use. And it's intentionally so. But the idea is that you couldn't tax labor because that's a form of slavery. That's what laboring is. It's a form of slavery. You tax your body, you tax your muscles, you tax your energy. And so they brought in income tax, of course. So it's a very sneaky way of getting your income off of you. In other words, the fruits of your own labor are taken from you. And they disguise slavery under different reasons for doing so. It's always for the greater good of those who rule you and all their helpers who live so high in the hog. However, getting back to the main thing here, they always keep control of the future. And I've mentioned over the many years here about the culture industry. That's where you get your opinions from, your feelings, your emotions from, your tears from, your laughter from. You're even taught what to laugh at today. In fact, it's a whole science of getting people to laugh. It's basically Pavlovian. The canned laughter that the US came out with back in the 1950s, maybe even before that for radio, it was a stimulus response. You get the stimulus of hearing people laughing, and you'll laugh along with it. There's even a term in Hollywood, it's called like a joke. There's a formula to a joke, and you come to the punchline, and people are so trained in it, they'll laugh at the punchline even though it's technically not funny at all. So you're trained in so many ways you're not even aware of. And in the archive section at cuttingthroughthematrix.com, I've gone through over the years various articles, some from the intelligence, the US intelligence for the military, who they've published in their own magazines, articles like The Mind Has No Firewall and Perpetual War and things like that. It's very Orwellian because, remember, wars are not meant to be won. It's meant to be continued under many guises. And many reasons for that too. It keeps you subservient to the state who's going to protect you, and you don't mind getting taxed so much again because the research and development must mean you get better weapons to keep you safe, right? That's the whole con behind it. But in Perpetual War, they talked about the techniques they were using, and that particular article was so interesting because it talks about the use of the same culture industry that they'd used against Americans and the world, to be used against the whole world step by step, including the Muslim countries too. And the guy in it obviously was an intelligence officer, and he says, well, give them all the degrading stuff that we've made so popular in the US, and not just violence and nudity and all the rest of it, but as far as you can possibly take it, to destroy the cultures that are still firmly held together by their own moral rules, etc., etc. People who are moral can't be taken over. It's very easy to bring people around to immoral acts, basically, or immoral thinking, until it's standard fare on your television. So much so, you'll laugh at things that technically perhaps you shouldn't even be laughing at, including grisly stuff as well. It's so bad today that when you, and I've mentioned this many times too, you're going to see shortly the next step that the big boys talked about after they won the homosexual battles for being shown on television, and so on. The next step, they said, would be bestiality, things like that, and intergenerational sex, doing away with the gender thing altogether, and underage stuff, doing away. In fact, there's a lord in Britain apparently just under fire right now because he stood up for one of these groups many times that wanted to bring down the age of consent to about 4 years of age, believe it or not. Now, that doesn't cause outrage today because people are so contaminated with watching their daily fare of corruption from television, because it's standard entertainment today, that there's no outrage at all. And there'll be even less outrage when they go the next step and the next step. That's how you do it, by the Fabian style, step by step. Give them time to absorb this, and then go the next step, and we accept it very easily. It's very easy to do, isn't it? It's very easy to do. I've talked before about the guy who was sent out to catch the wild boars. In the US, some parts of the US have wild boar problems, and apart from Washington, D.C., and you find that these boars were very wild and had all their senses there. They tried everything to catch them. And the guy came in, he said, I'll catch them for you. And he'd come every day with his half-ton truck. The first day he'd drive and stop about a quarter of a mile away. They'd watch him, and he'd dump off some feed for them and then drive away for about another quarter of a mile and watch them. And he kept doing that for about a week or so. And then each time he dropped off the food, he'd get closer. He wouldn't drive so far away. And they'd get used to him. And eventually they come right up to the truck over the weeks, and he put the stakes in, and he put the fencing in, and eventually came in one day and he closed the fence. That's how you do it with the public too. Granny's been contaminated gradually in her era. She'll sit with her daughter and watch stuff that is pushing the envelope, and so she doesn't turn off the TV. And so the daughter or the son watches it along with them. When they grow up and have children, they're more and more contaminated, so they can go to the next step and the next step and the next step, until, I've said before, you'll have live sex on television as standard fare. Even in comedies, there'll be live sex, you see. Because, you see, you can be contaminated so easily, like Bezmenov said. And Yuri Bezmenov said that they were so surprised, the KGB, when they saw the US in the 70s, when they visited it, to see just how well their agenda had worked since the 1960s to destroy the culture. Now, but that means destroying morality, common values that were shared, and how people would be outraged at certain things. That's all gone. That was gone then, actually. And it's really down in the pits today. Nothing bothers most folk at all, except their pocketbook. That's about it. But I'd like to also touch on the effects it's having on the general public. Professor Quigley and many other professors teach this kind of thing to do with histories and rise and fall of empires, which they also call ages, between ages. And you'll find that before it falls, let's presuming it was falling naturally, which is another story altogether, then certain things happen. The people lose their traditional values. The elite, and everyone copies the elite's behavior, by the way. It's mimicry, because you are taught to worship them, and you do. You're always in awe in the presence of power and lots of cash. You behave differently in their presence. And you find that the debauchery starts, of course. The scandals break out until it's normal. The general public copy the same behavior because the media and their culture industry teaches them so. In ancient times, they used drama plays and so on to do it, to get people, especially the young, to mimic what they saw. And eventually, the people are non-functional, really, and they're degenerate, and they become rather stupid in many ways. There's many things they could prattle about, like all the television they've watched their entire life and all the stars' names, but anything else is out of the picture. They don't know. That's how successful it's been in this age. And remember, these things have been done through the ages intentionally to destroy cultures. Just like, as I say, in the Perpetual Wars things from the US War College in their magazine, they said that they'd use the degeneracy that they put on Americans to basically do the same thing across the world. And they know it'll work because you've got all your behaviorists and think tanks working together and the neuroscientists to find ways to make it more effective. Even anthropologists, very important anthropologists, they bring them into Iraq with them and all those countries that they've taken out and taken the oil. And they work with the troops and so on to find the Achilles heel in different cultures so they can destroy it all the more quicker. Sex is a great thing. And especially when there's natural restrictions on sexual behavior, sex always wins because the youth go gaga since their hormones are skyrocketing at the time. That's part of the weaponization of it all. So those at the top know what they're doing, because only when you're degenerate can they bring in a new system where you're even more subjugated than the last system. It's very simple. And that's the whole agenda behind Agenda 21 and all of these things. To bring into a state where you have to be told what to do by experts. And the big boys who helped design this part of the system have written their books about it. They've done it all. It's been completed. Most folk can't think without it. And they'll parrot automatically any expert that comes along. Even if it could be any actor on television saying they're an expert, they'd believe it. As I say, I've watched the thermometers here every night all through this winter. And it's been the coldest winter I've ever seen in Canada. And the official weather forecasts from even the government stations are about 20, sometimes 30 degrees above the real temperatures outside at night. Now, why is that? Why don't they adjust it throughout the night? They don't. They don't say, oh, we're surprised by last night's temperature drop. Nope. So that goes down in the books as that's what it was. When they say 5 below, it was actually 35 below. Amazing stuff going on. And because you're trained not to even look for and check anything for yourself, why should you check anything for yourself? Why would they lie to you? What doesn't fit in with Agenda 21, global warming, and all the carbon pollutions and so on, and taxes they want to make you pay? So it doesn't fit in, so it doesn't exist, you see. And it'll do most folk. Most folk will say, well, I feel rather freezing, but it must just be me. We make excuses for it because it never dawns on them that they're getting lied to. It never dawns on them at all. But here's the thing too, you must destroy the existing religions, especially when there's a lot of people in the same religion or from the culture that spawned off from the religion. You must attack and destroy those and bring in a humanistic type society in the intermediate stage before they bring in the earth worship, of course, which Gorbachev talked about, that they would bring a form of earth worship in. And that can be done. Like a science fiction, they can teach the young that Mother Earth is alive and a creature and it's the one soul of the world and all this new age stuff that they're getting prattled on about. And that's one of the biggest techniques, of course, that they can really, really brainwash the young with. You look at what's happening today, just with fiction and the internet too. You've got vampire cults. There's one today where they're into the fantasy playing acting, and it goes out of hand, of course. And one of them's talking about a vampire-obsessed truck driver. He kept sex slaves locked up in his semi-trailer near Twilight Express for months at a time, and abused while wearing fake fangs. He even fell down their teeth, made them wear false teeth. He kidnapped him. Where do you think all that started? Remember Buffy the Vampire Slayer? And all the hordes of vampire movies afterwards? And these folk got into it. The sadomasochists always jump into these things. That's why you were given Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all the other ones that came afterwards. That's why you were given it, folks. I can remember at the time, even in Toronto, there was articles in the paper where people in Toronto, they found youngsters drinking each other's blood in back alleys and things like that. That's the effect it can have on lots of people. And then with all this sadomasochism, it's only a step from doing that and kidnapping people and going the whole way with it until you end up with death and all the rest of it. But there's no doubt about it. This guy, it says Timothy J. Fides, who's 54, accused of kidnapping at least 2 women and hold them in his cemetery where he traveled the country. One was a 19-year-old victim who was also a relative. Fell down her teeth and forced her to wear dentures where he wore a pair of his own with fangs in it. Another adult victim said she agreed to go to dinner with him, but ended up captive in his truck for 3 months. They were beaten a lot, almost choked to death. And this guy who did it, obviously, is also into child pornography. It says that they found lots of child porn on his stuff. They should use that same technique with all the British politicians. I mean, a real investigation, not the fake ones you get. But anyway, this is what you've got there. And it put me in mind of all the New Age. The New Age movement came out of Freemasonry, by the way. The official monthly magazine of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which isn't Scottish, by the way. Its name of the magazine was called The New Age. And they said in the magazine that they were going to be responsible for bringing in the New Age, you see. Now, New Age has within it the perennial religions which they bring out at this time when they're taking culture down. The perennial religions being all vague kinds of spirituality, gurus galore, mystic meanings that you'll have to find out if you want to get to a higher heaven, vibrating at higher frequencies, color-coded frequencies, and to vibrate out of this world, yada, yada, yada. The oneness of us all, you see, the world's soul, blah, 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 all the fairy stuff that works awfully well because, you see, you can always take people out of their religion. You see, but you can't take the religion out of the people. When you take something away, they will try and fill it with something else in order to get meaning from life. And the more pressures and chaos you put on people, the more terrified you make them, the more desperate they are to find a meaning of life. Because, you see, they can't deal with all the masses of problems. Oh, we're going to have a financial collapse. Yeah, we get this all the time because we're kept terrified of wars, or the threat of wars, or financial collapse, and all the rest of it by those who own the system. That's how they keep you under control. Which makes it kind of weird, because why would you want to keep the same system going that's never worked for you? And you think you can vote and change it. Oh, gee. Well, anyway, that was the vampire obsessed trucker, right? And then you had the Heaven's Gate. Remember in the 90s, you had the Heaven's Gate cult, so-called a religious group. And in the 90s, they followed this guru who brought in UFO religions, millennialism. They brought in all the New Age thing, the oneness, and plus evolution too. So your body and soul were going to evolve to the next ET kind of thing. And people flocked to this character, who was a nutcase fanatic, but he had deeper problems than just that. He was also homosexual, it seems, and this is how a lot of them, including himself, were castrated, actually, in his cult. And what these guys will do, the techniques are very simple, but always the same, whether it's a Jim Jones or anything else. You can start going into what you think is occult teachings. And it's very popular, this kind of thing, especially, as I say, when people have lost their basic religions or guidelines and they're desperate for meaning in life, and because they feel helpless and they can't fight all the problems of the world, which they're bombarded with all the time. And so they join the cults hoping to find, if I can just find the secrets of what this means and that means, then I'll be godlike. I'll be free from worry. I'll be free from threats of any kind, because I'll be like a Superman or a godlike, you see. And so out come the gurus. A lot of them are supplied to you by the CIA, because you'll find the same CIA research going on within all these cults before they end up killing themselves. That's always there. And because you see, you can use that on a bigger scale in the general population, and this is what's coming about today. That's why you've got so many talk shows out there now pretending to know secrets. Now, I enjoy deciphering old Masonic codes and things, because I never forget for a minute that whatever you can decode, whatever man can decode, was put together by man, not some supernatural being. And secret societies down through the ages have always used codes so no one would find out what they were talking about or conversing about amongst themselves. There was hand codes and everything. They could build a whole language. Even the early monks in Christianity, when they took the vows of silence, they developed a system that became worldwide for all their groups of various hand signals and gestures, because it was forbidden to speak, you see, in some of these groups. So there's always an answer for it which a person can decipher. We know too that some cultures have had and do have alphabets where the letters are also numbers. We know the Romans, for instance, and even the Greeks used the Chaldeans, and you could actually use the Hebrew as well, because it was also a number, and if they were scrambled into numbers, they could mark it on sticks. The messenger ran with the stick to the other part of the army, and another person there could decode it, you see. Very simple cryptology. But you'll find the same thing with the terms that you say in Freemasonry, and you can spend your life reading it and having a good laugh, because when you know what things are, you often do laugh. You understand of how they communicate to each other. But things go deeper with some people too, and these are the ones who are scared stiff of life. And mind you, this system it means to try and scare you of life altogether. The best war to have, even in ancient times to the present, is psychological warfare on the public. You destroy them with psychology and fear, and they aren't going to fight like virile, angry men. It's not going to happen. They're already conquered. Very simple. So you can all be conquered so easily by those who understand the formulas. And believe me, you have literally thousands of think tanks across the world, all using these techniques to make you follow them on behalf of the big boys themselves. Make them follow even the things that sound good, green this, green that, because they need you to protest for the very laws to get passed that they want themselves, so they can have everybody off the land and they can drill there, get gas out of it, or whatever else they happen to want to do. They want to own all the resources of the planet, and they use what they call useful idiots. Well-meaning people, but useful idiots. The ones who lead them know exactly what they're there for. They're getting well paid for it. But yeah, getting back to the Heaven's Gate cults, it's very interesting to watch the videos up there about it, and you get an idea of how these things actually work. And they're all very, very similar, where they bring you in with little secrets, with a guru who knows the secrets, and they give you forms of hypnosis go on, even in a general conversation. Because there's different ways you think, there's different levels that you think on and reflect on, as opposed to the one you would use for driving a racing car, where you must be on the ball split second. And there's another level beneath that, where it's meditative, you're contemplative about things. So these bring you into a contemplative state and a hypnotic state, and you start to, your total logic part for survival gets submerged into the subconscious state, and you're under hypnosis and easily managed to believe things you should never ever, things you should actually scoff at. So you had the Order of the Solar Temple, you had the Heaven's Gate group, you had the Jones, group 2, the Jim Jones cult. They all killed themselves, mass suicide. And CIA involvement, definitely. It was known about that one too, all along. Because you're being these are being studied. They can be used on a mass scale. Mass scale. So be very, very careful of these groups and people who pretend to know secrets. As I say, I could sit and teach you secrets all the time. But simply by decoding stuff. That's all it is. And as I say, what man decodes, man put together, not some god or some supernatural deity. Very, very simple stuff, you see. It's just to keep it secret from the public. That's the only reason it's secret. Not because there's some magic involved in there. So we're careful of folk who come out as gurus and tell you about their own personal experiences. And you hope, if you catch a hold of their robe, that somehow this person's closer to the great all. Call it what you want. The great all, the oneness, than you are. That's a standard way of human behavior. Where at one time the people would touch the cloak of a king. They believed it had curative powers, even in the time of King James. They were regarded as wholly closer to God than you. Same with priests and so on. Because you never have enough faith in yourself. You don't have the confidence that these people seem to portray to you to do the same thing. You see. So you fall for all these groups. And the con men who make a killing off you, let's hope it's just a financial killing, who come out and say, yep, and they rehash all the old theosophy stuff, all the old Rosicrucian stuff. They don't have to write new books. They just take it and hold chapters from previous ones over 150 years. It's all been done before, you see. But there's no end of folk who want to believe it, because they have nothing to believe in now, and they're desperate. Absolutely desperate. And as you get more and more afraid of everything, and all this news is bashing you, oh my God, there's 1,000 things, and you can't deal with them all. You can't deal with more than 2 major crises in your life at a time, or you crack up. And we're in that stage of almost cracking up. Along comes the gurus. And they tell you that a wonderful experience. And they tell you they maybe took drugs with it, or maybe not. And the great all came through them on a hilltop or whatever, and their whole body vibrated, and they could have left the world, you know. They could have left the world. Because you see, you're all base, they tell you, because you're in a lower density of vibration. You're not high enough, you see. Of course, there's many ways to get high. But that's what you're told, and people fall for it in swarms. And they throw money at gurus, just like priests, because they think they got the answer. They're closer to the great all than I am. And they'll pay big money for the next bit of the code, and the next bit of the code. And here's the key to it with cults. Here's the key to it, and con men. Here's the key, folks. Eventually, these leaders, after taking you on this big ride, this crazy ride, you see, that you've followed step by step, waiting to get to the ultimate oneness and knowledge and so on, they can't take you any further except out of the world. Out of the world. And the psychology, their own psychology that's working on them as the leader, makes them commit suicide. Some of them don't do that. They get you to commit suicide and they bugger off somewhere else. Because there's nowhere else they can take you. I can remember Bill Cooper talking years ago about this too, and he said, they always tell you there's an ultimate secret. An ultimate secret. And he says, guess what? There is no ultimate secret. That's the secret. And that's it, you see, folks. So be very, very, very careful of these groups. And as I say, look up these stories, Order of the Solar Temple, Heaven's Gate, religious group, which is a cult, and the vampire obsessed trucker, and also the one with the werewolf they had recently in the States, a guy dressed like a werewolf, playing a fantasy game. He got young 14-year-old girls to come and meet him to get into the fantasy. People are so screwed up now they can't tell the difference between fantasy and fiction, and it's very dangerous. Because with all the slasher movies, which people are gobbling up like crazy, It's always mixed with sex and violence. That's a great technique for conquering the mind, you know. Sex and violence. Very primitive, you see. Both parts of it. Very primitive. And some directors and producers know this technique perfectly well because they themselves are very warped, believe you me. And here's the werewolf one. It's in the Mail Online. It says, werewolf enthusiast, 44 years old, groomed 14-year-old girl for sex and went on a run after recruiting teens online to join his fantasy weapon games. And you see him standing there with his black outfit on and his leather strapping on, and the werewolf head, and a rifle in one hand and a pistol in the other. And there's all these young bimbos around him that flocked to him because they're getting right into all these games. Do you think I've mentioned before, these games were all designed by military, you know? Why do you think the military would be designing children's games? Why do you think there's so many behaviorists involved in creating these games, and psychologists and so on? Just to sell games, you think? Do you think that? But he's 44 years old, this guy, and eventually ran off with one of them who's 14 years old. Quite something. And this is all the rage now, you see. People cannot switch off from fantasy into reality. And luckily they got this guy right now. But I mean, what's his past been like? How far has he gone in the past? Is a thing they might never find out. I mean, werewolves can't talk, eh? They only bark. But anyway, this is the kind of thing, as I say, be very, very careful of, because we're living in weaponized times, and even news is weaponized. And even the disclosure of when you think you're fighting the news, in a sense, or exposing the news that's given to you, you can overwhelm people by hitting them with 50,000 things at the same time. You can handle 2 crises at a time. Why do you think it's used, bombarding people with bad news? Boom, 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 boom. Till you're under the kitchen table quivering in fear. So don't be terrified, don't get petrified and made immobile by a weaponized system. Your culture is weaponized. Your entertainment is completely weaponized. I mean, they've got amazing, brutal, sadomasochistic sex in almost every movie, and the scenes in a lot of these awful movies are just stuck in there to get the sex in, because they have nothing to do with the story. And the youngsters, ones that are watching all these slasher movies, and supposedly under the guise of horror, it's the same thing. Whatever little hook of a story is meant to make you watch it right through, hoping you find, because you see, you're a curious person, you want to find out who done it, that kind of thing. And how does it end? But it's just a vehicle. The horror thing is just a vehicle for all the sadomasochism that goes on in between it. That's what it's for. It's a delivery vehicle for delivering the weapon part of it into your brain. The mind has no firewall. And today you don't have the traditional family anymore. It's been under attack as well. That had to go first. And so there's no one to tell the children, you know, best not to watch that. I'll tell you why. And then you do tell them why. This is weaponized to hit you and to make you behave in a certain way, and a way that you'll often regret, and might get into danger as well. There's no one to tell them anymore. Because you see, a long, long time ago, not just Bertrand Russell and others that worked with the big global society to bring in this present culture, he said that it doesn't matter if the parent or parents raise the child. The technique of social indoctrination for the culture to be given to the children is given by the state now. They've already put the parents or the parent out of the picture, until the child has more respect for, say, a youngish teacher than their parent, their stickler of a parent. Parents are always portrayed as stupid in the movies and all the sitcoms and so on. It's been very successful. What do you know? You're just my dad. You're just my dad. And that's how it is in today's society. But it won't stop because people they have a craving for entertainment. That's one of their big weaknesses. That's why it's always been used against you. Down through the ages, even the days of Plato, he talks about the possibility of licensing the playwrights. I think they already were actually, but he wanted to license musicians as well because they could even then sing songs that could lead to revolution if the youngsters would follow them. You find down in the times of Shakespeare and even other countries too, with their own versions of things, plays were often put out as a way of communicating some injustice to the general public. Very common. Still today are given the same techniques by those who run the system. But they want you to change a certain part of it, but they actually use you to demand that they change a certain part of it, which has nothing to do with the outcome that you're actually expecting to see. All these big national parks they created that you can't go on anymore. All the zoned areas, the corridor areas under Agenda 21, where there's human corridors and animal corridors, and you believe it all? No, but you'll find clauses in there where the big corporations can get rights, licensing rights to drill, frack, and everything else on those lands. First, did they get the people off? And they got most of them off by doing in the farms, by big agri-farm business, because everything's corporate today, international corporations. And the next part too is using heavy taxation to get folk off the land, or simply closing down a road and you can't get access to where you live. So many ways to do it, or bringing in the agencies that do the eco-testing and stuff. Oh, you can't live here anymore. This is contaminated. Many ways to get you off the land. And we've watched this since at least the 60s, escalating. And all the big groups, of course, get heavily funding by big foundations that we don't elect. The richest foundations on the planet, some of them worth trillions of dollars. And often their leaders are also the head bankers. I'm talking about the international moneylenders, not the ones that just have a bank on the corner. Old stuff, isn't it? But it's true. Biospheres for the UN. Biospheres. So the first thing you have to do is try and reclaim your brain. That's quite an objective, Because you find that almost everything you think about is given to you to think about. The opinions you come to are ones you've been guided to come to. Mainly by the omission of another side of a story. I used to laugh at Walt Disney when I was small because I knew that rabbits didn't really talk to deer and things like that. But in the Disney movies, they gave you all this complete fiction. And they'd even show you sometimes where the carnivores would talk to the herbivores, which doesn't happen in real life. The carnivores tend to eat the herbivores, but you were given a complete fiction to prepare folk for all the guises they were going to use to steal all the land off you. In the old days, it was much easier. The king just came into the country like the Normans did, and set up their warlords as to take like satrapies for the king. They were over lords for them. And all the serfs, all the people became serfs, which is a nice way of saying slave, because you couldn't move from the land and you weren't paid for it. You simply forked out most of your crops to the lord. And you supplied him with excesses that he could sell. And you supplied him too with even your body. If you wanted it for warfare purposes, he would just take it. And if you didn't go, he burned you down or killed you. That was, democracy of in old times. It was so wonderful. Knights were bold and all that. But that's the reality of it. Today, it's a disguised system where you're far better behaved, actually, because you think you're living in something called democracy, and you all have rights, and you do have rights. You have the rights not to go outside the boundaries of everyday talk or speech. There's authorized speech today, you see. And you have committees sitting deciding what's authorized and what isn't. And it doesn't. You don't have to even have an argument anymore. Let's have a discourse about something. No, if you say something, they'll try and find you're a hater, or they'll give you a slur name or something like that, which shuts you up completely, Pavlovian style, because everyone's been brainwashed into what these words mean, even though it's got nothing to do with the present situation on any particular topic you're talking about. It's just outside the box. They don't want you to go there. You can't go out there. You'll find just how much freedom that you have then if you do. And this technique can be spread to many, many other areas, because I remember reading about the two guys from New York that were employed from a big top marketing company by the World Health Organization to bring in a system to get people to stop smoking. And the guys whose big think tanks and lots of money went into, your tax money of course, to get you to stop smoking. And the whole idea was to create social approval for things that they wanted you to do and social disapproval for things that they didn't want you to do. They started with the children at school until if someone lit a cigarette 500 yards away, the children would smoke. I mean, they'd start coughing and choking, even they're about half a mile away from you. And that's a Pavlovian response. Then they spread it into the general society. And then step by step, it's always incremental. Well, people who work in offices could smoke outside the office. Then you stop that. Well, they can't smoke in the street now. And step by step, now, this the two guys said in an article that they wrote about how successful they'd been at changing the behavior of people. It's behavior modification. They said we can use this on any other thing we choose, the same techniques. And it'll work just as well. Incrementally, give it a few years, step by step. And you can vilify any group you want to. Whether it be obese people or whatever it happens to be. Or even meat eaters, say. Whatever they choose will be vilified with the same techniques, and you always get the youngsters too at school. You get local authorities to ban it in workplaces or around workplaces until they're made to conform or they're fined out of existence or into prison. Now, getting back to what I was talking about the New Age and so on, be very, very careful before you give your brain away to any con man. I mean, there's even late night talk shows that do nothing but talk about this stuff, knowing they're conning the people. And knowing that it could cause harm to different ones too. But again, obviously it's not our problem. It's amazing how you can always justify it when your paycheck is pretty fat and it's not your problem, isn't it? But there you go. Some guy comes along and says, I've got the answer. Or he comes out with stars all over his suit or something and tells you about his experiences. Or he's another guru of some kind, or even a famous person like the reincarnation of Jesus or Gandhi or whoever it happens to be. If you fall for that, folks, something's really seriously wrong in your life, in your mind. And they tell you, oh yeah, you're way up to violet, get the violet colors going. You vibrate higher in the violet colors, you know. And you can vibrate right out of this world into a high astral plane. Safe. See, it's a promise of safety in a fearful world. Always happens at the end of an age. This age was planned to end by those in control. And they bring in their new system, and you're even better slaves than you were before. That's what it's all about. But don't just follow people blindly because they give out tantalizing little bits of information. As I say, if you just buy a pile of old Rosicrucian books, you'll see it's all in there. Just rehashing the same. They don't have to make up new stuff. Just rehash it all. Generations of stuff. Going way back. Always promising you the next lure. You see? Some of them even give you classes on conology. That's what I call it, conology. That's the art of conning people. And they give them classes on it. And they promise them, if you just get to the next step, you'll be higher and higher in your understanding. And when you're at that stage where you understand it all, you have these super godlike powers. But they can never take you there, you see, unless you tell the whole cult to commit suicide. Or they might just say they've got enough in their bank account now and pack it in. But there's no end of people who've had, since the 1960s especially, this alternate, they call it perennial religion. They always pull out the hat at times of the end of an age. The same perennial, the reincarnation thing, the whole idea of hidden masters. And often the guys who present themselves as masters, he has to be a hidden master who's now out in the open, right? Otherwise, how would he know this stuff? What man can decipher, man will put together in the first place. And I very much doubt he was vibrating above the kitchen table when he was doing it. And it's so easy to tell people, and we like telling people about our odd experiences. We all have them, odd experiences. But there's never any answer or meaning that we're left with. Once in a blue moon there might be something, but it generally doesn't repeat itself over and over. When they tell you they do have all the answers, you're dealing with someone that P.T. Barnum would advocate, like a student of his, when he says a sucker born every minute. Ancient techniques. But it's very lucrative for those who want to exploit people. I generally put the information out for free. That's all. Here's what it means. This is how they communicate to each other. Here's a degreed system, just like a military system, from private all the way up to general. Same idea. And lots of people think they're superior. Lots of them do. The ones who really are superior are only superior because they understand the art of keeping the masses in a different reality from themselves. And picking their sons and daughters' wives for them. A standard down through the ages with the wealthy elite. They tell you to marry for love. They marry wealth and their offspring. That's why they live through their offspring, their progeny. Be careful. Don't give your brain away. And when they tell you they can always have the same experience, this high spiritual experience, tell them to prove it. They can't prove it to you. Everything has to be taken on belief, your gullibility. You see? They can't. You can't fool animals the same way, the higher mammals like chimps and things. You can't do it with them. Because they don't understand language as you know it. That the art of conning human beings is done through persuasion, where you start with a common agreed idea, and then someone with a good vocabulary and an intellect can warp it off into la la land and have you follow it and agreeing all the way, nodding your head. That's the dialectic process. Like a salesman uses. They start off as a nice day, you nod your head. Nice house you've got here, you nod your head. You're saying yes, you see. And then along the sales pitch, this is a nice vacuum, yes. It's all psychology, folks. Read Plato, read all the other philosophers, same thing. They start off with a premise which you can all say, yeah, we stand on the ground, don't we? Yeah, oh yeah, we all stand on the ground. Before you know it, this guy's telling you can vibrate higher and higher. If you just pay him the money, he'll give you the secrets. And there's techniques to make you believe it. The perennial religion. As though understanding is going to cause something to happen. Amazing, isn't it? So be very, very careful. And watch out for the cults. And if you've got children and they're just obsessed with their technologies, they can't talk to anybody in the face-to-face anymore. And they're maybe talking to all kinds of weirdos because they don't know who is on the other end of that phone. And they're texting to. And all the sock puppets put up by government agencies and foundations and experiments run on them even by the universities like MIT. They don't even know what's happening. But it's all carefully monitored to see what's working. This is the big laboratory as we live day by day. There's another experiment going on. There's many experiments going on to find out what will work on the mass of the people, the bulk of the population. Be careful. Now I've got to get back to trying fixing this water pump here. If it's possible to do, which I'm not really sure it is until the summer. As I say, I've never seen so much snow. as we've had this year in Canada. And the temperature is still plummeting at night, way below zero. And during the day too. Still isn't getting above the freezing mark. And stacks of snow to go. It's going to be murder trying to move once that snow starts to melt and freeze day by day. Whenever that starts, and it floods into the road and freezes, and you can't, it's like a skating rink, of course. There will be flooding this year too, as they play up the chaos, you see, that's caused. By the way, I meant to mention, there's articles out there from a few years ago, I've read them before, where it was found out that agreements had been reached through all the different states in the US and parts of Canada to hold back the sluice gates rather than release a little water at a time from big dams and things for runoff and let it all go at once. Why didn't you get all the flooding here and there over the last few years? That was the reason, folks. What you don't know can con you. And what you don't know can make you suffer too. But anyway, from Hamish myself, from Ontario, Canada, it's good night. May your God or your gods go with you.